My God.
Muting. We have a few minutes before the meeting starts. Our new room, very sensitive. So just keep that in mind throughout the room. But feel free to talk. Still mingle.
Feel free to talk, but you're being recorded.
I ran back to the stadium. I know. Disappointed. Yeah. The other gate, that's what we need is what the stairs, there's some stairs going up. Okay. We've got one here. So you got one? That one, pretty much everyone there. Sitting. Yeah. That's probably a good suggestion. Okay. Walk my so I walked my way here. My son was actually in the stadium. He was a student down there. So he was sitting there. So I went up and then I set the game students for the end of the game. 3-0.
Unplugged.
There I saw Paul. 6 and Debbie is 7. What's that?
Scott, thank you for the maps. Really helped.
I have to refer back.
It always fascinates me that there are these huge chunks of the state with no technical college that's is the professional service area. Strange.
Of course, the community college.
I'm good. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll share.
There's just one copy of each one.
Some places do overlap. All places.
I may appreciate this.
You know, the tech companies actually aligned their service areas themselves years ago. That's how they were initially established, if I remember correctly.
Well, that makes some sense then as to how it came to be that way. I found it puzzling, find it puzzling. Good morning, everyone. It is 11 o'clock, so we will go ahead and call our meeting to order and get started. So first of all, I want to say that, of course, this is being live streamed, although we are having some video problems this morning, so we don't have video of the whole room. But I think anything that is a PowerPoint that we need to share, we'll be able to do that through our individual computers, so everyone can at least see that. Please state your name before speaking, so everyone listening will know who they are hearing from, and I think that's especially important since we don't have a video component today. Of course, if you're not on the committee when you're speaking, please mute your microphone. The mics in this room are very sensitive, as we've already said. Please ask the chair to be recognized to speak, and Amy, as always, will be monitoring our chat and raise your hand features. This is being live streamed for the public on KBOR's YouTube channel. Amy, would you please call roll for members and presenters?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. We have Regent Kiblinger here. Regent Lane.
Present.
Regent Mendoza.
Present.
Regent Benson.
Here.
We also have today presenters. We have Scott Smathers, who is present in the room. And then we also have Daniel Archer. Thank you. And that completes roll call for today.
All right, thank you. First item of business is the approval of, excuse me, the minutes from our last meeting on January the 3rd. So I trust everyone had time to take a look at those and would entertain a motion for approval.
Madam Chair, I would move for approval.
Thank you. We have a motion from Regent Benson.
Second.
Second from Regent Mendoza. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, next up under our discussion items, we have the service area policy revision, and Scott Smathers will be sharing that with us.
Thank you, Chair Kiblinger. And I am Scott Smathers. I'm Vice President of Workforce Development for the Board of Regents. About a year ago, board staff was asked a question regarding service areas, and reviewing that issue, staff found a couple of changes that we're recommending to be made to the board's service area policy. The proposed service area policy change recommendations, and you can find this starts on page 5, I believe, of your packet. The proposed changes are, number one, adding a reference to KSA 74-32, section 433, which has been inadvertently left off, and you can find that on page 11 of your packet, about 3/4 of the way down, if that helps you find it. It's underlined in the actual policy there. And then secondly, if you're using the full board book, it'd be on page 51, if that helps you. So I'm sorry, I don't know which one you're using, if you're using the packet or the full book. So, and so that's under FI, F and single I. And then the other item that board staff is recommending is adding in 2 sections of the policy on page 12 of your meeting packet or page 52 of the full board book. The request that KBOR staff be notified at least 30 days prior to a new course being offered outside of a new face-to-face course being offered outside of an institution's service area. And so the advantages of that is it provides KBOR staff with time to document the request and ensure the proper procedure has been followed. And inadvertently, it also will actually give institutions whose area is being moved into a little more time possibly to offer the course themselves if they would have preferred to do so. I know the 2-year sector has been told about this change, has seen this change, and I have not received any concerns from them at all regarding the proposed changes. And with that, I will stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Scott. Regents, any questions, comments? And am I correct that we need to make a motion on this to approve moving it forward to the full board?
That's correct.
Right? Entertain such a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the recommended changes and move to the full board for approval.
Thank you, Regent Lane. Is there a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Regent Benson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carried unanimously. Thank you. And we will now hear from Dean Ginsburg, I believe, with the Educator Workforce Task Force final report.
Thank you all for having us again. I have a few of my colleagues here Sharon Brewer from Employees State, Terry Steffen from Washburn, and from Wichita State University. We have several of our colleagues on Zoom. There's one of our colleagues is dealing with a very sick parent in a hospital. Feedback we got when we presented to you all back on December 14th, I believe it was. We, as a group, went and through this again, met amongst ourselves, I think 4 or 5 more times, the deans, and then met with the full task force again last week to come up with the final version of this. What we have done in this is we've grouped priorities at the front end. So there are 3 major priorities that we have indicated in the report. I'll run through those in just a minute, and then we group the other recommendations together after that. We do think they're all important, but you do need some prioritization. What we ended up with was some recommendations that will require funding, some recommendations that will require us to impact policy and current practice in various agencies across the state. We call for the creation of a series of summits around one of the recommendations, and we call for the creation of 3 task forces or sub-task force from this committee that fall that are consistent with 3 of the recommendations that we made. Okay, I'll just run through the priorities. That's okay. You have the report in front of you, so you can see that. The first one, what we did is the top priority. We took the major. There are others that will require some funding, but we took the ones that we thought need the most funding, and we felt that in many ways these things went together in terms of creating capacity for the state to increase the pipeline, students coming in, and the ability for students in the field for moving towards licensure. The first one is the one, and this has this funding request has 4 components. One about student scholarships, one about a marketing and communication plan about teaching, and the multiple options that are available for students to get licensure in our state. If we learned anything through all this, we learned a lot of people don't know there's lots of ways to get licensure in the state. We included in here the state providing support for paid student teaching, and then finally support for candidates taking the licensure exams. So this is all bolted together in one recommendation, all involve some funding. The student scholarships is the main one. Basically what it is building on the KBOR's current Kansas Teacher Service Scholarship. The idea being to attract more undergraduates and graduate students into licensure programs. What we've recommended is an increasing of the money and a relaxing of some of the mandates that are somewhat restrictive in terms of licensure area, in terms of location where you might have to teach and things like that. We did suggest that most of the current components of the program as to payback of loans if you choose not to pursue your degree and things like that continue as is. I won't go over the details of the costs. We can talk about that if people are inclined to want to do that. The second component of this is around marketing and communications. It was quite eye-opening to us when we met with you all and frankly met and talked to others, how little people around the state know about what is currently already available. We oftentimes get from legislators that why don't you state institutions do more? And we tell them we're actually already doing that. And so we do think that there's a need for marketing, not just about what's available, but about the importance of this profession and why it's important for young people and even career changers to consider this as a field. So we think that the marketing and communication campaign goes hand in hand with the scholarships. It's another way for us to market the scholarships to people that might be thinking about going into teaching. Recognizing, for example, that students going into engineering pay the same tuition at most campuses than students going into education. So the scholarships are important for attracting kids who might be inclined to want to come to us, except for the fear of cost of getting a license. Paid student teaching, we consider to be vital here. Teaching is one of the few professional fields where there are not paid apprenticeship programs. What we find oftentimes is that during the student teaching semester or year, many times students have to give up jobs that they need in order to pay the tuition. So that increases their costs for getting the degree and just making teaching equivalent to other fields we think is important. So we make this recommendation on paid student teaching. We built the numbers here on the number of student teachers we had last year, which was a number fairly consistent over the course of years. This is an opt-in program for districts, not a mandate, but we do think that many districts would opt in. We also felt that the districts had to have some skin in the game. So the recommendation here was that the state would pay 75% of the cost and the district would pay 25%. We recommended $5,000, so it's $3,700. And the rest would be covered by the district. And finally, on this first major priority area, the funding, teachers are very low paid. Average starting salary in our state still about a little less than $40,000. And doing what we can to make this more feasible for people in order to get a license, we've recommended that there be a fund put aside so that at least some of the licensure costs would be covered by a state fund. We've recommended $250 for some fields. That'll cover, we require the state at least 2 tests depending on the field. That will cover either the full cost or close to the full cost depending on the student specialization. And the rest would be covered by the student. We also recommended this be allowed once. So if the students were to fail, then the burden is on them to pay for the cost. So that's the first major recommendation.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I know it can sometimes be difficult to gauge the ROI of a marketing and communications
Very
campaign.
difficult.
Have you seen other states that have successfully utilized marketing and communications campaign?
Yeah, I know other states do it. I'm a social scientist. I should have the answer to that question, and I don't. I do know though that, so this is our cop out for not having those data. There's an awful lot of bad press that are foisted on teachers, not just by the media, but by our legislators. I haven't heard from this organization ever, but you know what we all hear. We know what we're hearing nationally, and you know what the media picks up on. And so at least having something positive entering that fray seems to us to have value without our ability to say, yes, this amount of money will pay off this much. It's not a huge ask for the state. I mean, and, had we asked for multiple millions, I likely would have made sure we had that. Sure. That's a fair question. Thank you.
Madam Chair. Question.
Yes.
Dean Ginsburg, let me just start by saying I'm so appreciative of the work of this task force. You had a real short turnaround, and then we ruined your holiday break by asking you to be prepared to come back today. So I just want everyone to.
Oh, this was fun.
Okay, recognize that I think that on January 3rd, you returned to conversation around this, and we very much appreciate it. Question somewhat similar to Regent Benson's, but it's about number 1 in terms of increasing the scholarship. Do we have any idea of the net gain of additional individuals interested in teaching that we might realize as a result of increasing the scholarship? And then I have a follow-up on number C as well.
That's great. Again, another fair question. There have been other programs, federal programs, and I think others in other states that have seen a gain from this. I mean, much of that I submit will relate to how well we market it and how we let young people know about it. We've got a short time span now between if just refunded today and the start of school next year. So we all have our work ahead of us. I don't have a hard number. I don't. I have seen that there have been increases and they differed on the program from locale to locale. So at this point, that's about the best we can do. We can look more into that to see what we can find. But scholarship programs, they're mixed. Sometimes you put a good amount of money up and a lot of it sits being left unused. I'm a little worried about that, just to be honest with you, given what we're seeing nationally. I'm not talking about Kansas necessarily, in that the inability to attract people into teaching. But I'm encouraged by the fact that, for example, Microsoft just announced they're going to lay off 10,000 employees. Let's contact. I mean, there are ways to go about getting people into this field, and providing scholarships, I believe, is a big part of it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So it sounds like recommendation B is tied to the success of A, the marketing of that.
Yes.
And I would hope that we'd at least meet or exceed the engineering numbers that were successful from that program. So perhaps we can talk about that.
Yep.
My follow-up is on item C, paid student teaching, which I want to celebrate because back in the dark ages when I did my student teaching, I also worked and realized that impacted probably my focus and attention on my professional preparation. So I think it's past time that we really take a look at this. I guess my question is, have we talked about, or maybe this is the next step, the administration of this? Do we have a kind of a general vision of how that might work? Would it rest with the regents? Would it rest with school districts? How are you thinking about that?
As I recall, we had some conversation on the task force about this, and it's a little bit above my pay grade to recommend that, but I believe this is something that would have to probably be handled by the State Department of Education in conjunction with school districts. With maybe a partnership of KSD and KBOR in terms of that. It's the payback portion of that gets really difficult. That if somebody, one of the cautions that we talked about, and you were there when we talked about this recommendation with the task force, is that we are asking 18-year-olds to make a decision likely for their next 7 years of their lives. They're going to have to go to school for 4 years and stay in their major. You're all on KBOR. How often students change their major in college? 5 times is the average. So we're asking people who are 18 years old, if they take it as a freshman, that they have to understand that if they drop out, this becomes a loan and it has to be paid back. And then they have to go work in the district. Now, we're not requiring them to work in math or science, for example, in KCK. We're recommending broadening it up. But if they leave early, there's a payback portion of that as well. So I believe that the Board of Regents has some administration for that already established for the loan program that's already in place. It will need to be more robust. I submit my thought. We didn't talk about this. I think this would be vital that we get the people in charge of providing financial aid on their region's campuses together, and they talk a good bit about this, and they make it crystal clear to young people what they're signing when they sign yes on the dotted line.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all for those questions. They're all very good questions. Our second priority recommendation is about the University Elementary Education AA Elementary Degree Program. We have put together, it's in Appendix C, of what a universal agreement might look like for 60 hours at the community college and 60 hours at one of our institutions. What we're asking for here is for the Board of Regents to pull together a series of summits, which involve us at the Regents institutions and our staffs, as well as some others through KSD and KBOR, so we can start to talk about how this will work. Because the reality is that our programs are all different, and our programs are all accredited. And I'll talk about KU as an example. We require a certain sociology course, and what we put together requires an anthropology course. And what we'll have to do is then go back through our whole core curriculum at the university and make sure that course that's required in the transfer agreement is also included there. Otherwise, we jump up from 120 credit hours to 123 credit hours. And one of our mandates that we've set for ourselves here is keeping everybody at 120 credit hours. So there'll be some interesting discussions, some changes, I think, at the K-12, at the Regents institutions level. It'll be some changes at the community college level to get this right for their programs. But we think through a series of summits, we can get this done, and we can get this done in a timely way and be done by the end of this academic year, sometime in June of 23. Questions on that one?
I would simply say that I appreciate the sense of urgency and your thoughts for the timeline and how quickly you can put those summits together and have a meaningful outcome.
I'm going to tell you there's a very self-serving reason for our doing this. We want to have the most robust enrollments one can imagine. And so all of these things that we're talking about serve us as well as serving the state more broadly. The third major priority is one that it's related to workforce development. It isn't necessarily related to shortages in the workforce, so it's broadly related to our what we were asked to do, but it focuses on developing a structured literacy plan and training for pre-service teachers and current teachers. And I don't think anybody would argue that reading literacy is highly important for our state, for any state, for anybody. What we've recommended is creating a task force, a sub-task force of our group, with the goal also by June 23 of addressing these 7 issues that we've identified here, where we want to focus on what the best research has identified related to structured literacy in terms of phonetic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, along with the research that's coming around treating kids with dyslexia and what needs to be done to improve their reading skills as well. So our notion here is there's a fiscal ask here of staff for each of the Regents institutions that would be adding this as their main work, in addition to what we're already doing with a far greater focus moving forward. As that's part A of that, and part B of that is having this group and others work on developing a really thoughtful professional development opportunity, because the state has about, I don't know the exact number, maybe 35,000 teachers. And we're talking about with several thousand in the pre-service realm, we've got 30,000+ teachers that need the support for literacy training as well. So it's 2 parts to this particular thing. Stop and see if anybody has any comments or questions.
Madam Chair. I do have a question. We do a lot of work with the science of reading and letters and how all that is good for our students, but has there been any consideration into how that works for English learners? We have, in our district, we have over half of our students are English learners. There are very similar districts within our corner of the state, Wichita, Kansas City. I mean, teachers aren't prepared for the diverse populations that we have. So I don't know if any consideration has been put into that component.
I would say there has been. I don't have the answers to how well each particular program might work with it, but it's, you know, in Wichita, for example, I think that they have 56 different languages spoken by students that come into the Wichita schools.
We have 45 in our district as well.
In KCK, it was, and I know we did an assessment for KCK, and we did the brilliant thing of doing the survey that we're doing in English and Spanish. They said, thank you, we need 12 more languages. So the reality is that all of these have to be able to be worthwhile for students whose first language is in English. I think most of them have that capability. I can't speak to specific ones. It's not my area of expertise. I would add that it also needs to be able to work with students with various disabilities, dyslexia being one. There may be others that would be related to this. So that will be a part of what we will examine, and we will add that, Regent Mendoza, if it makes sense, so that we make sure that gets addressed.
Is there questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I can just make a comment that I believe of all the recommendations that are powerful, this one is the most transformational to our young people who are in classrooms. So I look forward to the continued work there, and want to say to the deans and to the committee that I think the Regents will stand behind you 100% of what we need to do to help you move this forward.
Yes, I think this can really be transformational to higher ed in Kansas, but more importantly to the K-12 students in Kansas, and what that eventually means to higher ed and workforce years down the road. This may be some of the most impactful work that we've ever been part of.
You know, it can be really, and you all know this, there are other groups working on these issues and all well-meaning and we're all seeking towards the same end. I mean, given the power of KBOR, I think in this task force, if we can somehow take a leadership role in bringing this all together, so we're not, we're working at cross purposes on what we all agree is significant for the development of the young people in our state. I think that would be a significant part of this. I'll run through the others. I don't want to minimize each of their importance, but there's a lot of them, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. The next one, we call them other teaching workforce recommendations. Teaching is unlike many professions. You think of nursing, for example. There's various levels you can get nursing until you're a full RN. And teaching, day one of teaching, you're the same way as the day that you retire. You don't have any tiers in the workforce. We're recommending that we do that, especially at the front end. Some states have started teacher cadet programs where you get paid a certain amount and you spend some time getting yourself up to being a full teacher. There may be other ways of doing it. This is something that we can recommend. Obviously, but this is something that has to be handled, I think, by the State Department and by school districts. But taking a lead and entering our voice and maybe bring groups together to do that. That's why we asked for a task force here, so we can bring the various parties together to address this issue. The teaching world is behind here. We've talked about creating master teachers within the field, but not something working up towards full teacher level. And all of those things I think are important. The Department of Commerce, as you probably know, in the state is focusing on a system-wide registered apprenticeship program. It's an important opportunity. I think that this is something that if played out can have a big impact on teacher shortages. The State Department is working as the focal point on this, and we're working with the Department of Commerce on putting this program into place in Kansas. There currently is money through the Biden administration for this, which is great, although it's competitive, so it's not certain it'll be there. And who knows with the changes in Washington, what monies will not be there going forward. But we think that an important recommendation and one that we wanted to do in collaboration with our colleagues at the Department of Commerce who are focusing on this workforce need. We think there may be multiple ways to try to attract more people into teaching. And as a result, we thought that the state might put out through KBOR an innovation fund for new teacher preparation approaches. For example, KU just started the first undergraduate special education program in the state. It took us years to get that. There was no money, so we were doing that on the sides to do it. And Kansas has been an outlier in special education, for example, that to get licensed in special education, you had to hold another license in another field, and then you would get an endorsement on top of that. And those of you who are educators know this. That's just one example. Many of us are working on competency-based models. Many of us are working on some different options for credit for prior learning. That might be a great way to get people into teaching. There are the troops to teachers programs and things like that that are interesting. Bottom line is we think an innovation fund might be a really useful thing for getting the institutions to come up with some new and innovative approaches we haven't yet thought about. One of the issues, there's multiple issues affecting the teacher workforce. We mentioned salary. I'm going to talk about that again soon. But early mentoring and induction for teachers is really, really, really important. It's rather isolated in our state in that each of the districts does it on their own. Our recommendation here is that there should be a program put together so that we can perhaps plug the holes in the leaky bucket of people entering the field and leaving because they haven't had the right kinds of supports. I won't go into a lot of detail here, but this is the core problem in keeping our teaching force. And just as an example, while we have 35,000 some odd teachers, I think there's about another 50,000 licensed people in the state who, for whatever reason, aren't teaching. The next one is another one where we're asking to create a task force. And this one is about examining the assessment systems that we utilize here. This would be with our colleagues at KBOR and some other experts looking at, are there better ways to assess our students? We think there are. As you well know, as an example, many universities are dropping the SAT or the ACT as a requirement because they're predictive of nothing. And much the same might be said about some of the tests that we require for licensure. The point is assessments are important, and good diagnostic assessments are really important for student performance. But we think there are some examples that we highlight here. We think the state could do better. So we recommend a task force to look at that. The State Department is working already. We know that. One of our task force members is Shane Carter with KSDE, and they've been working on teacher licensure transferability from state to state. And they've joined a collaboration of states. So it looks like the states, we're going to move forward in that, but it's something that we believe will serve Kansas well. So people wanting to come into teach who have had the right training and experience can move into a Kansas license. Let's not be naive. We got to address the teacher salary issue. Let's also not be naive. 5% won't do it. So realistically, you're talking about if you double the salary, I guarantee you would have kids who might go into engineering becoming math teachers. Now, we're not going to get there. It's too much money, and there's 3.5 million teachers nationally, but we can't take this issue off the table. So we didn't want our task force to be looked at and people laugh at it because we left out what arguably is the most important issue. So we didn't. You all are familiar with the HLC requirement around concurrent teaching between high schools and universities, and there's some issues that can be dealt with. We believe in order to strengthen that, and that might help the teacher workforce, but that will help all kids moving into college. So we have a recommendation around that. And then finally, CAPERS, I believe with the best of intentions, has at times created disincentives for people wanting to come back into teaching. I know at the university, I've wanted to hire people who retire from systems, and they have to sit for 6 months. And then if they come back, they have to give up the retirement. Well, then they wouldn't have retired in the first place if they did that. But if we want to fill, in the short term, if we want to fill gaps, this is a great opportunity for us. We hope that we can get the legislature and CAPERS to take a look at this and make this move. And with that, I'll stop and thank you for your attention.
Ginsburg, thank you to you and all those who have assisted with this. Again, we're just so impressed with the quality of the recommendations that you've come up with, the quick turnaround that it's only been a few months since we charged you with this, that you've produced these recommendations, and so we really do appreciate that. I know that as was already mentioned, you've gone above and beyond and even given time when you're supposed to be on vacation. And so I know that this work is very important to all of you, and we're looking forward to carrying it forward to the next step and doing all that we can to see these actually carried forth, and some of the ones that maybe a little bit of funding can immediately help with, trying to find some ways to do that. Regent Lane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that that I will be making a motion that the full board accept this report, and that we task President Flanders to do two things. One, help prioritize things that we could begin to implement immediately, including task force, and to ask for staff, KBOR staff, to be assigned to support the team moving forward, just so we can get the work done. So I just want to, unless there's any objection to that, that's my plan for this afternoon.
I do want to say that the members of the Board of Regents and President Flanders were terrific in working with us, and we all appreciate your support and your help with this.
We appreciate again your work and your expertise and your insight into all of these issues, and which is why we have such far-reaching recommendations here. Some obviously that we can get started on and make headway on more quickly than others, but I look forward to moving forward with that. Do we need to make a motion to accept this report to move it on? Okay, I thought that was the case. Bridget Lane, would you like to make that motion?
I would be honored to. Madam Chair, I move that we accept the report and we move it on to the full board with anticipated action to follow.
Is there a second? Thank you, Regent Mendoza. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Again, thank you to everyone for all of the work that's gone into this.
Just one final comment. I need to thank Amy for helping us move through timelines that we didn't adhere to, but we got here successfully, so thank you.
All right, next up, Daniel Archer will give us an update on the system-wide general education and our next steps with that.
Yeah, very good. So created a timeline here that's pretty well done, provided. I'm sure you don't have any additional feedback there. Try to connect with you here in the next couple of days on that and make sure we're kind of on the same page, and then we'll get that sent out and move forward.
Very good. I just, I think it's something that, as we've said before, Basque really wants to continue to stay involved with this and be able to have a pulse on how we're moving things forward. So I look forward to talking with you about how our timeline can involve Basque staying engaged with the process. I assume that that's something that my fellow regents are in favor of.
Absolutely.
Very good. So I think next up then is simply talking about items on our January the 31st virtual meeting, and do note that that is January the 31st. So what would normally be the first part of February meeting actually falls in January. So don't let that sneak up on anybody. I know it always catches me by surprise when I realize when some of these dates are. On the agenda, credit by exam policy revisions, new program approvals, no doubt updates on the system-wide gen ed. Once we visit, that would be another item that we would talk about. Anything else that anyone has knowledge of that should be on our agenda?
Madam Chair, I don't know that we'll be ready, but we might want a placeholder for update on the dashboard, because
Absolutely.
by this date, we will have had the feedback from the field on the definitions. It might be nice to review those.
Yes, because we should have some of that feedback. So yes, Amy, if you would add that.
And I'm just wondering, and it may be premature, but beginning to discuss any changes we might want to think about for program review. I know we haven't gotten the final RPK report, but maybe just general discussions about some.
Yeah, let's just put that on there as a placeholder. It probably won't be something we can get into maybe particularly deep, but you're right, we can start that conversation.
Maybe just reviewing our current process too would be a good starting spot.
I do like that idea. Let's ground ourselves in current practice. So if you could put a review, Daniel, perhaps you could walk us through that just to make sure that all of us have a thorough understanding of how that has worked to date. Good suggestions. Anything else that we would like to see on that agenda? If not, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Been moved by Regent Benson. Is there a second? Second by Regent Mendoza. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We